The steel door creaked open, revealing stacks of gold bars that gleamed under Adam Cross's flashlight. The massive former boxer's hands trembled as he counted row after row of precious metals and jeweled artifacts worth $200 million, hidden beneath a cursed mountain hotel for nearly a century. But this wasn't just about the treasure. This discovery would prove to everyone who had mocked him that sometimes the biggest victories come from the most unexpected places. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Adam Cross stood 6 feet 8 inches tall, his broad shoulders casting a shadow across the grimy floor of the Ravenshaw Lodge as he wrung out his mop for what felt like the 1,000th time that evening. The water in the bucket had turned a murky brown, a reflection of both the ancient grime coating every surface of the mountain hotel and the state of his own life. Once, those same hands that now gripped a cleaning tool had delivered knockout punches to opponents in packed arenas, earning him the nickname, the Mountain, for his towering presence and devastating power. Now, at 42, those hands were cracked and calloused from honest work, the kind that paid bills but didn't restore pride. The lodge groaned around him like a living thing in pain, its Victorian-era bones settling into the mountain with sounds that would make most people flee. Built in the 1890s as a luxury retreat for wealthy industrialists, the Ravenshaw Lodge had seen better days, much like Adam himself. The ornate wallpaper peeled in long strips that resembled dead skin, and the crystal chandelier in the main lobby hung at an odd angle, several of its arms missing entirely. Guests rarely stayed more than one night, and most of those who did left before dawn with wild stories about voices in the walls and doors that opened on their own. Adam didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in bills that needed paying. His 9-year-old daughter Ella was the center of his universe, a bright spark of joy in a life that had been steadily dimming since his boxing career ended with a devastating injury to his left shoulder. The surgery had gone well, the doctor had said, but the confidence never returned. Without that crucial edge, without the absolute certainty that his body would respond when his mind commanded it, Adam had found himself hesitant in the ring, second-guessing combinations that had once flowed like water. His opponents sensed the change immediately, and within 6 months, he was out of professional boxing entirely. The transition from celebrated athlete to struggling single father had been brutal. Adam's wife Sarah had left when the money ran out, taking nothing but her clothes and leaving behind a daughter who asked every night when mommy was coming home. That had been 2 years ago, and Ella had stopped asking, but Adam saw the question in her eyes sometimes, especially when she watched other kids with their mothers at school events. He'd promised himself he would be enough for her, that he would find a way to give her everything she needed, even if it meant swallowing his pride and taking whatever work he could find. The night cleaning job at Ravenshaw Lodge paid $8 an hour, which was barely enough to cover their tiny apartment's rent and Ella's basic needs, but it was steady work, and Adam had learned not to take steady work for granted. The owner, a nervous man named Winston Blackwood, who seemed to jump at every shadow, had been desperate enough to hire someone willing to work alone in the supposedly haunted hotel that he hadn't asked too many questions about Adam's qualifications for janitorial work. "You just need to keep the place presentable," Blackwood had said during their brief interview, his eyes darting constantly to the windows as if expecting something to appear there. "Clean the common areas. Make sure the few guests we get don't complain about the state of things. The basement is off limits though. Don't go down there for any reason." Adam had nodded and taken the job without hesitation, though the basement restriction struck him as odd. Every building needed maintenance, and basements were usually where the important mechanical systems lived. But $8 an hour was $8 an hour, and he wasn't in a position to ask too many questions. The mockery from his former boxing colleagues had started almost immediately. Videos of him mopping floors had somehow made their way onto social media, shared with cruel captions like, "From heavyweight to house cleaning," and "The Mountain reduced to cleaning up after tourists." His old rival, Marcus "Lightning" Rodriguez, had been particularly vicious, posting a photo of Adam with his mop alongside a picture from their championship fight 3 years earlier. The caption read, "Remember when this giant thought he was tough? Now he's scared of some ghost stories. Pathetic. Each taunt felt like a body blow, but Adam had learned to absorb punishment both in and out of the ring. He thought of Ella sleeping peacefully in their small apartment, her homework completed at the kitchen table while he made her favorite spaghetti dinner before heading to work. She never complained about their circumstances, never asked for expensive toys or clothes like other kids her age. When her classmates talked about family vacations to Disney World or new gaming systems, Ella would simply smile and change the subject. Her quiet acceptance of their situation made Adam's heart ache with both love and determination. Tonight felt different from the others, though Adam couldn't quite put his finger on why. The autumn wind howled through the mountains with unusual ferocity, rattling the lodge's windows and sending tree branches scraping against the roof like skeletal fingers. He'd been cleaning for 3 hours when he first heard the sounds from below, a rhythmic tapping that seemed to come from deep within the building's foundation. Adam paused, his mop dripping steadily onto the worked hardwood floor as he listened. Tap, 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 then silence. Then the pattern repeated, but from a different location, as if something was moving through the basement level beneath his feet. Winston had been very clear about not going downstairs, but Adam's curiosity was stronger than his respect for arbitrary rules. He'd been a professional athlete, trained to analyze and respond to unusual situations. If there was a plumbing leak or some other maintenance issue in the basement, ignoring it could lead to much bigger problems for the hotel and potentially cost him his job if Blackwood blamed him for not investigating. Adam made his way to the main staircase, past portraits of the lodge's original guests that seemed to watch him with disapproving eyes. The wealthy families and industrial barons from the early 1900s stared down from their gilded frames, men in formal wear and women in elaborate dresses, all of them radiating the confidence that came with, quote, enormous wealth and social power. Their faces seemed to judge him, this giant man reduced to menial labor, this former champion now dependent on their historical hospitality business for survival. The basement door was tucked away behind the main desk, painted the same dark green as the lobby walls, so it blended almost invisibly into the shadows. Adam tried the handle and found it locked, but the wood around the latch was old and warped. A gentle push with his shoulder, applying just enough of his considerable strength, and the door swung open with a groan that echoed through the empty lobby. The staircase descended into complete darkness, the kind of black that seemed to have weight and substance. Adam pulled out his phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the rough stone steps that had been carved directly into the mountain bedrock. The air grew colder as he descended, and he could smell something unusual, not quite mold, but not quite earth either. Something that reminded him of old metal and forgotten spaces. The basement was larger than he'd expected, extending far beyond what should have been possible given the lodge's footprint. Thick stone pillars supported the ceiling, and the walls were lined with what appeared to be wine racks, though most of them were empty. The tapping sound was clearer down here, definitely mechanical rather than supernatural, and it seemed to be coming from somewhere even deeper in the building. Adam followed the sound through a narrow corridor that led away from the main basement chamber. The walls here were different, fitted stone rather than rough rock, suggesting this section had been built with more care and intention. His phone's light revealed a series of heavy wooden doors along the corridor, most of them standing open to reveal empty storage rooms. But at the end of the hallway, one door remained closed, and the tapping sound was definitely coming from behind it. The door was unlocked but heavy, requiring Adam's full strength to pull it open. Beyond was a natural cave chamber, clearly part of the mountain's original structure that had been incorporated into the building's foundation. And standing in the center of the chamber, dressed in practical hiking clothes and holding some kind of electronic device, was the most beautiful woman Adam had ever seen. She was perhaps 30 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and intelligent green eyes that widened in surprise when Adam's light fell across her. She held herself with the kind of confidence that came from facing the unknown regularly, and despite being caught trespassing in a forbidden basement, she didn't seem particularly concerned about Adam's discovery of her presence. "You must be the new night janitor," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I'm Emily Rhodes, and I think we need to talk." Adam stood frozen in the doorway, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. The woman, Emily, was clearly not supposed to be here any more than he was. She had some kind of sophisticated equipment with her, devices he didn't recognize that beeped and flashed with digital readouts. The cave chamber itself was remarkable, with formations that suggested it had been carved out over centuries by underground water flow. "How did you get down here?" Adam asked, though he realized immediately it was probably the wrong question to start with. Emily smiled, and despite the bizarre circumstances, Adam felt his heart skip in a way it hadn't since Sarah had left. "Same way you did, I imagine, though I've been coming here for weeks, and this is the first time anyone else has shown up. You're not easily scared, are you?" "I don't believe in ghosts," Adam said, stepping fully into the chamber and letting the heavy door swing shut behind him. "Good," Emily replied, "because what's really going on here is much more interesting than ghosts." She gestured to her equipment, which Adam could now see was quite sophisticated. Digital displays showed various readings, and several devices were mounted on tripods, pointing at different sections of the cave walls. "I'm a paranormal investigator, technically, but I'm really more of a historical researcher who specializes in unexplained phenomena. Most of what people think are hauntings are actually just old buildings with interesting secrets." Adam moved closer, fascinated despite his confusion. "What kind of secrets?" "The kind that explain why Winston Blackwood inherited this place 5 years ago and immediately started having financial problems, despite the fact that his great-uncle who owned it previously was rumored to be sitting on a fortune." Emily pointed to a section of the cave wall where her equipment was clustered. "These readings suggest there's a hollow space behind that wall, something significant enough that it's affecting the building's acoustics. That tapping you heard? It's not supernatural. It's structural. Something behind there is responding to changes in temperature and humidity." End quote. Adam studied the wall she indicated. To his untrained eye, it looked like natural rock formation. But now that she mentioned it, he could see subtle differences in color and texture that suggested part of it might be artificial. "You think there's something hidden back there?" I think Winston's great-uncle, Cornelius Blackwood, was involved in something during the 1920s that required a very secure hiding place." Emily's eyes were bright with excitement. The lodge was a favorite destination for wealthy industrialists during Prohibition. Lots of rich men with secrets. Lots of money that needed to disappear from official records. And Cornelius was known for his discretion. The implications of what she was suggesting began to dawn on Adam. "You think there's money hidden down here?" "I think there's something down here valuable enough that Cornelius never told anyone about it, including his own family. Something valuable enough that its absence has been slowly bankrupting the hotel for decades." Emily began gathering her equipment with practiced efficiency. "The question is, are you interested in helping me find out what it is?" Adam's first instinct was to say no, to walk away from whatever scheme this was and get back to his simple job of mopping floors and paying bills. He'd learned hard lessons about taking risks, about letting hope override practical judgment. But as he watched Emily work, saw the genuine scientific curiosity in her approach, he found himself drawn into her enthusiasm. "What would you need me to do?" he asked. Emily paused in her packing and looked at him directly. "I need someone who isn't afraid of dark spaces and strange sounds, someone strong enough to help me move whatever we might find, and someone who understands that this has to stay between us until we know what we're dealing with." She hesitated, then added, "I also need someone I can trust. I've been researching alone for too long, and there are aspects of this that would be safer with a partner." Trust. Adam couldn't remember the last time someone had used that word in relation to him. Since his boxing career ended, since Sarah left, since he'd become just another struggling single father invisible to most of the world, trust had been a rare commodity. "What makes you think you can trust me?" "Because you came down here alone to investigate strange sounds, instead of running away or calling the police," Emily said simply. "Because you're working a job that most people would consider beneath them to take care of your daughter. And because you're still here talking to me, instead of turning me into Winston." The mention of Ella brought Adam back to reality. Whatever was happening here, whatever Emily was proposing, he had to think about his daughter first. "I can't afford to lose this job. It's not much, but it's steady, and I've got responsibilities." I understand, Emily said, and her tone suggested she really did. But consider this. If we're right about what's hidden here, if Cornelius really did stash something valuable in these caves, then finding it could solve both our problems. I get answers to questions I've been researching for years, and you get financial security for your daughter." End quote. Adam weighed her words carefully. The rational part of his mind, the part that had learned caution through painful experience, told him to walk away. But another part, the part that remembered what it felt like to take calculated risks and succeed, was intrigued by the possibility she was describing. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. Emily's smile was brilliant in the glow of his phone's flashlight. "I'm proposing we become partners. You help me with the physical aspects of this investigation. I share whatever we find. 50-50 split, whatever that turns out to mean." The offer hung in the air between them, laden with possibility and danger in equal measure. Adam thought about Ella, sleeping safely in their small apartment, trusting him to make the right decisions for their future. He thought about Marcus Rodriguez and the other fighters who had mocked his fall from grace, who saw his current circumstances as proof that he'd never really been as strong as they'd thought. He thought about the years stretching ahead, mopping floors and counting every dollar while his daughter grew up watching him shrink into invisibility. "All right," he said finally. "But we do this carefully, and if it starts to threaten my daughter's security, I walk away." Emily extended her hand, and when Adam shook it, he felt the same electric anticipation he'd once experienced stepping into the ring for a championship fight. "Partners," she said. Over the next week, their investigation took on a rhythm. Adam would complete his regular cleaning duties in the upper levels of the lodge, then meet Emily in the basement chamber, where she had set up a more permanent research station. She'd brought additional equipment, including ground-penetrating radar, that confirmed there were indeed hollow spaces behind the cave walls. The readings suggested a complex network of chambers, some natural and some clearly artificial. During their time together, Adam learned that Emily was far more than just a paranormal investigator. She held a doctorate in American history with a specialization in the Prohibition era, and her interest in supposedly haunted locations grew out of her research into how wealthy families had hidden assets during times of economic and social upheaval. She'd investigated dozens of sites across the country, following paper trails and family stories that suggested hidden wealth, but had never found anything as promising as the Raven Shallow Lodge. "The 20s were a perfect storm for this kind of thing," she explained, as they studied the cave wall where her instruments detected the largest hollow space. "You had Prohibition making certain kinds of business ventures extremely profitable, but also extremely illegal. You had the stock market boom creating unprecedented wealth that people wanted to hide from taxes, and you had a lot of wealthy men who were paranoid about government overreach and bank failures." Adam found himself looking forward to these nightly conversations almost as much as the treasure hunt itself. Emily treated him as an intellectual equal, asking for his opinions and taking his suggestions seriously. When he pointed out that the artificial sections of the cave walls showed tool marks consistent with mining techniques from the late 1800s, she immediately began researching whether Cornelius Blackwood had connections to the mining industry. When he suggested they map the entire cave system before attempting to breach any walls, she readily agreed and spent 2 days creating detailed diagrams of the underground network. It was a new experience for Adam, being valued for his mind rather than his physical capabilities. Even during his boxing career, people had focused on his strength and size, treating his tactical insights as secondary to his punching power. Emily, however, seemed genuinely interested in his thoughts about their investigation, his theories about how the hidden chambers might have been constructed, and his practical suggestions about how to safely explore whatever they might find. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night, when Emily's equipment detected an anomaly in the cave wall that suggested not just hollow space, but air movement. "There's definitely something behind here that connects to the surface," she said, studying the readings. "Some kind of ventilation system, which means whatever's back there was designed for long-term storage." Adam examined the wall section more closely, running his hands over the stone surface until he found what he was looking for. "Here," he said, pointing to a barely visible line in the rock face. "This isn't natural formation. It's fitted stone, designed to look natural from a distance, but actually removable. Working together, they carefully removed several stones from the wall, revealing a gap just large enough for a person to crawl through. Emily's flashlight revealed a narrow tunnel beyond, clearly artificial, and leading deeper into the mountain. The air flowing through the gap was cool and dry, carrying a metallic scent that made Adam's pulse quicken with anticipation. "I'll go first," Adam said, but Emily shook her head. "We go together," she replied firmly. "Partners, remember?" The tunnel was just wide enough for them to crawl side by side, and it extended about 20 feet before opening into another chamber. This one was clearly artificial, carved from the living rock with precision that spoke of professional engineering. And it wasn't empty. Adam's flashlight beam fell across wooden crates stacked from floor to ceiling, each one marked with dates from the 1920s and symbols that looked like shipping codes. Emily gasped behind him as her light revealed even more crates lining the walls, along with metal containers that gleamed dully in the darkness. "My God," she whispered. "Adam, do you realize what we're looking at?" Adam's hands shook slightly as he approached the nearest crate. The wood was surprisingly well preserved, protected by the constant temperature and dry air of the cave. The lid was secured with old-fashioned nails, but they yielded to pressure from his multi-tool. Inside, nestled in straw packing material, were small canvas bags that clinked with metallic sound when he lifted them. The first bag contained gold coins, dozens of them, each one gleaming as if it had been minted yesterday. The second held precious stones, diamonds and emeralds and sapphires that caught their flashlight beams and threw rainbow patterns across the cave walls. The third contained what appeared to be rare jewelry, pieces that even Adam's untrained eye could tell were worth enormous sums. "Emily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "how much do you think this is worth?" Emily was opening another crate, revealing more bags of coins and jewelry. "I don't know," she replied, her own voice tight with excitement. "But if every crate contains this much, if these metal containers hold more of the same, we could be looking at tens of millions of dollars, maybe more." They spent the next 2 hours opening crates and cataloging their contents. Gold coins from various countries and time periods, precious stones of every variety, jewelry that ranged from antique pieces to contemporary designs from the 1920s, and even some historical artifacts that appeared to be museum-quality pieces. The metal containers held gold bars, each one stamped with the Sayre marks and dates from the Prohibition era. Cornelius wasn't just storing money, Emily said as they documented their discoveries. He was storing wealth for other people. "This is like a safe deposit vault for rich men who didn't trust banks or the government." Adam was beginning to understand the scope of what they'd found. And when Cornelius died without telling anyone about this place, all of this just sat here waiting. "For 90 years, Emily confirmed. "Can you imagine? All this wealth just sitting in the dark while Winston struggled to keep the hotel running, while the building fell into decay, while everyone assumed the Blackwood fortune was just a family legend." As they worked, Adam found himself thinking about Ella, about what this discovery could mean for her future. College tuition would no longer be a source of anxiety. She could pursue any dream, any career path, without worrying about the financial obstacles that had constrained Adam's own choices. She could grow up knowing security, knowing that her father had provided not just survival but genuine opportunity. But even more than the money, Adam realized, was what this partnership with Emily meant for his own sense of purpose. For the first time since his boxing career ended, he felt like he was contributing something meaningful, using his mind and his skills for something more significant than basic survival. Emily's respect for his insights, her reliance on his strength and practical knowledge, had restored something in him that he hadn't even realized he'd lost. "We need to be very careful about how we handle this," Emily said as they finally prepared to leave the treasure chamber. "This much wealth, if it became public knowledge immediately, would attract all kinds of attention we're not prepared for. We need to research the legal implications, figure out ownership rights, maybe bring in experts to properly evaluate everything." Adam nodded, understanding the wisdom in her caution. "What do you think our legal position is? I mean, we found it on Winston's property, but it's clearly not his." "That's complicated," Emily admitted. Some of this wealth might be rightfully Winston's, inherited from Cornelius, even if he didn't know it existed, but some of it was clearly stored here by other people, and their estates or descendants might have legitimate claims. And then there's the question of whether any of it was obtained illegally in the first place." End quote. They sealed the chamber entrance carefully, replacing the stones so that casual inspection wouldn't reveal their work. As they made their way back through the tunnel and into the main basement, Adam felt a profound sense that his life had just taken a dramatic turn. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen, but the man climbing those basement stairs was different from the one who had descended them hours earlier. Over the following days, Emily began the complex process of researching the legal and historical background of their discovery. She reached out to contacts in academic and legal circles, carefully probing for information about ownership rights to hidden treasure and the specific history of the Blackwood family. Meanwhile, Adam continued his regular cleaning duties, but now every mundane task was infused with secret excitement. The mockery from his former boxing colleagues continued, but it no longer stung in the same way. When Marcus Rodriguez posted another video making fun of Adam's ghost hunting job, Adam found himself smiling at the irony. If Marcus only knew what ghosts had led him to discover. Ella noticed the change in her father's mood immediately. "You seem different lately, Daddy," she said one morning over breakfast. "Happier, I think." Adam ruffled her hair affectionately. "Just working on something interesting, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." But privately, he was becoming increasingly worried about exactly that. The more he learned about the treasure's potential value, the more he realized how dramatically it could change their lives. And change brought its own complications. How would he explain sudden wealth to his daughter, to their neighbors, to the school and community that knew them as struggling survivors? How would he protect Ella from the attention and potential dangers that came with significant money? These concerns came to a head during their second week of investigation, when Emily arrived at the lodge, looking unusually troubled. "We may have a problem," she announced, as soon as they were safely in the basement chamber. Adam felt his stomach drop. What kind of problem? The kind that involves other people starting to ask questions about the lodge's history. Emily pulled out her phone and showed him a local newspaper article. "Someone else has been researching Cornelius Blackwood, and they're not being as discreet about it as we have been." The article was brief, but alarming. A reporter was investigating local legends about hidden treasure at the Raven Shallow Lodge, interviewing elderly residents who remembered stories their grandparents had told about Cornelius and his wealthy guests. The article mentioned rumors of secret chambers and hidden wealth, though it treated them as colorful local folklore rather than serious possibilities. "This is probably nothing," Emily said, but her expression suggested she didn't entirely believe that. "But if someone else starts poking around here, if Winston gets wind of these stories and starts asking his own questions..." Adam understood immediately. Their discovery, their partnership, their carefully laid plans for researching and legally claiming the treasure, all of it could be jeopardized if other treasure hunters, or even Winston himself, began seriously investigating the lodge's basement. "How long do you think we have before this becomes a problem?" Adam asked. "I don't know," Emily admitted. "Maybe days, maybe months. But I think we need to accelerate our timeline. We need to document everything we found, get legal advice about our claim, and probably move the most valuable items to a secure location." The idea of moving the treasure filled Adam with anxiety. Right now, it was safely hidden in a chamber that had protected it for 90 years. Moving it meant exposure, risk, the possibility of loss or theft or legal complications they weren't prepared for. But leaving it where it was meant potentially losing it to other claimants or to Winston's family if they discovered its existence. "There's something else," Emily continued, and Adam could hear the reluctance in her voice. "I've been thinking about our 50-50 split, and I'm not sure it's fair." Adam's heart skipped. Was she trying to back out of their agreement? "What do you mean?" "I mean you're taking most of the physical risks here. You're the one who could lose his job if we're discovered. You're the one with a child depending on you." Emily's expression was earnest, almost pleading. "If we're really partners, then we should share the risks equally. But we're not. You're carrying most of the burden while I get to play treasure hunter with minimal consequences." The relief, Adam felt, was overwhelming. For a moment, he thought she was trying to cut him out of their discovery. Instead, she was worried about fairness in his favor. "Emily, we agreed on 50-50. You're the one who figured out there was something to find here. You brought all the expertise and equipment. Without you, I'd still be mopping floors and wondering about strange noises. And without you, I'd still be taking readings through cave walls and wondering what was behind them," Emily replied. "We're a team, Adam. A real team. And teams protect each other." Her words hit Adam harder than he expected. When was the last time someone had been concerned about protecting him? Since Sarah left, since his boxing career ended, he'd been the protector, the provider, the one responsible for everyone else's welfare. Having someone worry about his interests, his risks, his well-being, was a gift he hadn't realized he needed. "So, what do you propose?" he asked. "I propose we move faster and more carefully than we originally planned," Emily said. "I have a friend who's a lawyer specializing in property law and inheritance issues. I think it's time to bring him in, get professional advice about our legal position, and I think we should photograph and catalog everything in that chamber, create a complete inventory that establishes our role as the discoverers." Adam agreed, though the prospect of involving lawyers made him nervous. Lawyers meant official records, paper trails, the possibility that their secret would become public before they were ready. But Emily was right that they needed professional guidance, especially if other people were starting to show interest in the lodge's history. They spent the next 3 nights creating a comprehensive photographic record of the treasure chamber's contents. Emily brought professional photography equipment, and they documented every crate, every bag of coins, every piece of jewelry. Adam proved surprisingly good at organizing their inventory system, applying the same methodical approach he'd once used to analyze opponents' fighting styles. The process of cataloging everything also gave them a better sense of the treasure's total value, based on Emily's research into current precious metals prices and antique jewelry markets. They estimated they were looking at somewhere between $150 and $200 million worth of assets. $200 million? Ada repeated, the number feeling surreal even as he said it. "Emily, that's more money than most people could spend in several lifetimes." "It's enough to change everything," Emily agreed. "For both of us, for your daughter, for generations of your family. It's the kind of wealth that brings its own responsibilities." Adam knew what she meant. This level of money would require careful management, legal protection, probably financial advisors and accountants, and all the complexities that came with significant wealth. It was exciting and terrifying in equal measure, the kind of life change that would affect every aspect of his future. But as he watched Emily work, saw her dedication to doing everything properly and legally, he felt confident they could navigate whatever challenges lay ahead. She brought expertise and connections he could never have accessed alone, while he provided the practical skills and local knowledge she needed. They really were partners in every sense of the word. The crisis came sooner than either of them expected. On a Friday night, exactly 3 weeks after their initial discovery, Adam arrived at the lodge to find Winston Blackwood waiting for him in the lobby. The owner looked agitated, pacing back and forth in front of the reception desk with obvious anxiety. "Adam," Winston said as soon as he walked through the door, "we need to talk." Adam's mouth went dry, but he managed to keep his expression neutral. "Sure, Mr. Blackwood. Is there a problem with my work?" "Not with your work exactly," Winston replied, but his tone suggested the distinction wasn't particularly comforting. "I've been hearing some interesting stories lately, stories about people who've been asking questions about my great-uncle Cornelius in this lodge." The newspaper article Emily had shown him, Adam realized. Someone had connected those local folklore interviews to the lodge itself, and now Winston was asking questions. What kind of stories? Winston studied Adam's face carefully, and Adam had the uncomfortable feeling he was being evaluated. Stories about treasure hunters, about people who think there might be something valuable hidden on this property, and stories about strange lights being seen in the lodge late at night, lights that don't match the schedule of when you're supposed to be working. Adam's heart pounded, but his boxing training served him well in maintaining composure under pressure. "I haven't seen any other people around here, Mr. Blackwood. And I sometimes use extra lighting when I'm working in the darker areas of the building. Maybe that's what people have been noticing." "Maybe," Winston agreed, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. The thing is, Adam, I've been thinking about those old family stories myself lately. My great-uncle was supposedly a wealthy man, but when he died, the estate was much smaller than anyone expected. People always wondered what happened to his money. This was dangerous territory. Adam had to assume that Winston was testing him, trying to gauge how much he might know about hidden wealth on the property. I wouldn't know anything about that, sir. I just cleaned the building. Winston nodded slowly, but then he said something that made Adam's blood freeze. I've decided to have some renovation work done on the basement level. Nothing major, just updating some of the mechanical systems and maybe converting some of those storage rooms into more functional space. I wanted to let you know because it means there will be contractors working down there during the day, and I'll need you to coordinate your cleaning schedule around their activities. Contractors in the basement, people who would be specifically looking at the building's structural systems, who might notice inconsistencies in the cave walls, who could potentially discover the hidden chamber that contained $200 million in treasure. Adam felt dizzy as the implications sank in. When are they planning to start? He managed to ask. Monday, Winston replied. They'll be doing some preliminary assessments this weekend to plan out the work. 3 days. They had 3 days before professional contractors would be examining every inch of the basement, including the areas where Emily had set up her research station and the cave walls that concealed their discovery. 3 days to figure out how to protect the treasure, their claim to it, and Adam's job in the process. I understand, Adam said, hoping his voice sounded steadier than he felt. I'll make sure to stay out of their way. Winston seemed satisfied with his response and left shortly after, but Adam knew this was a crisis that required immediate action. As soon as the owner's car disappeared down the mountain road, Adam called Emily. We have a problem, he said when she answered. A big one. Emily arrived at the lodge within an hour, and Adam quickly explained the situation. Her face grew pale as she realized the implications of contractors working in the basement area. We have to move everything, she said immediately. Tonight, if possible. All of it. To a secure location where we can sort out the legal issues without pressure. Move $200 million worth of treasure in one night? Adam asked. Emily, some of those gold bars weigh 50 pounds each. There are dozens of crates. Even if we had a truck, it would take multiple trips, and that kind of activity would definitely be noticed. Emily was already pacing, her mind clearly racing through possibilities. You're right, we can't move everything, but we can move the most valuable and portable items, enough to secure our claim and protect the most important pieces while we figure out how to handle the rest. It was a reasonable compromise, but Adam could see the flaws in it immediately. What about the items we leave behind? If the contractors find them, if Winston realizes what's been hidden on his property all these years, what happens to our legal position? That's a risk we'll have to take, Emily replied. But if we can preserve enough evidence of our discovery, if we can get legal documentation of our role as finders, we should still have a strong claim to whatever remains. They spent the next several hours selecting the most valuable and portable items from the treasure chamber. Gold coins, rather than gold bars. The most valuable jewelry pieces rather than bulkier antique items, precious stones rather than larger artifacts, even limiting themselves this way. They assembled a collection worth several $1 million that filled 2 large duffel bags. The physical work of moving through the narrow tunnel repeatedly, carrying heavy bags while crawling on hands and knees, left both of them exhausted. But Adam's boxing conditioning served him well, and Emily proved surprisingly strong and determined. By dawn, they had successfully relocated the most critical items to Emily's secure storage unit across town, establishing their possession of enough treasure to prove their discovery regardless of what happened to the remaining cash. Now what? Adam asked as they sat in Emily's car outside the storage facility, both of them grimy and exhausted but oddly exhilarated by their night's work. Now we get legal advice, Emily replied firmly. I'm calling my lawyer friend this morning, explaining the situation and getting professional guidance about how to protect our interests. And you go home, get some sleep, and prepare for what might be a very interesting few days at work. Adam nodded, though sleep seemed unlikely, given the adrenaline still coursing through his system. What if the contractors find the main chamber? What if Winston realizes what we've been doing? Then we deal with it, Emily said simply. We have evidence of our discovery. We have actual possession of significant treasure, and we have a legal right to our finder's claim. It won't be simple, but we're not helpless. Her confidence was reassuring, but Adam couldn't shake his anxiety about the immediate future. In a few hours, he would need to return to the lodge and act normal while contractors poked around the basement where they'd spent weeks conducting secret treasure hunts. The irony wasn't lost on him that his greatest discovery might also cost him the job he'd taken to survive. Saturday passed in a blur of nervous energy. Adam tried to rest, but found himself constantly checking his phone for updates from Emily. She was making progress with her lawyer contact, but legal consultations apparently took time even in urgent situations. Meanwhile, Adam had to figure out how to explain to Ella why he seemed so distracted and anxious. "Are you sick, Daddy?" she asked over lunch, her 9-year-old intuition picking up on his mood despite his efforts to appear normal. "Just worried about some changes at work, sweetheart," Adam replied, which was technically true even if it barely scratched the surface of his concerns. "Are you going to lose your job?" Ella's question cut straight to his deepest fear, the one that had kept him awake most of the night. "I don't know," Adam admitted, deciding that honesty was better than false reassurance. "There might be some changes, but whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. We always do." Ella nodded solemnly, then surprised him by reaching across the table to pat his hand. "You're a good daddy," she said simply. "Even when things are hard, you take care of me. So I'm not worried." Her faith in him was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. If their treasure discovery led to legal complications, media attention, or other upheavals, how would it affect her sense of security? Money could solve many problems, but it could also create new ones. Especially for a child who had already experienced her mother's abandonment and her father's professional fall from grace. Sunday brought a call from Emily with mixed news. Her lawyer friend, David Chen, was willing to take their case and felt they had a strong legal position as finders of abandoned property. However, he also warned that establishing clear ownership of treasure found on someone else's property could involve lengthy legal proceedings, especially given the apparent value of their discovery. The good news is that finders' rights are well established in most jurisdictions, Emily reported. The bad news is that Winston, as the property owner, will almost certainly have legal claims as well. David thinks we're looking at negotiations, rather than a clear-cut victory for either side. "What does that mean practically?" Adam asked. "It means we'll probably end up splitting the treasure with Winston in some proportion," Emily explained. "David thinks we could reasonably expect 30 to 40% of the total value, which would still be life-changing money for both of us." 30% of $200 million was still $60 million, Adam calculated. Even split with Emily, that was $30 million. More than enough to secure Ella's future and his own, but the prospect of lengthy legal proceedings, of their discovery becoming public knowledge, of fighting Winston for their share, filled him with dread. Monday morning arrived, gray and cold, with an early winter storm threatening in the mountains. Adam approached the lodge with genuine anxiety, unsure what he would find. Winston's car was already in the parking lot, along with a contractor's truck and what appeared to be some kind of surveying equipment. Inside the lobby, Adam found Winston talking with two men in work clothes who were clearly the basement renovation contractors. They looked up when he entered, and Winston's expression was unreadable. "Adam," Winston said, "I'd like you to meet Ron and Jake from Mountain Construction. They'll be working in the basement this week, so I wanted to make sure you all knew each other." The contractors seemed friendly enough, shaking Adam's hand and assuring him they'd stay out of his way during his evening cleaning routine. But Adam noticed they were carrying sophisticated equipment, including what looked like structural assessment tools that could potentially detect the hollow spaces behind the cave walls. "We'll mostly be working in the main basement area," Ron explained, "checking the foundation, updating some electrical systems, maybe doing some minor structural repairs. Nothing too invasive, but we want to make sure everything is sound before winter really sets in." Adam nodded and tried to look interested rather than terrified. "Sounds like important work. I'll make sure to adjust my cleaning schedule so I don't interfere." Winston seemed satisfied with this exchange, and soon the contractors headed downstairs to begin their assessment. Adam was left alone in the lobby, listening to the sounds of footsteps and voices echoing up from the basement, wondering if today would be the day his secret was discovered. The morning passed slowly. Adam went through his usual cleaning routine in the upper levels, but found himself constantly distracted by sounds from below. The contractors seemed thorough and professional, their voices carrying up through the floor as they discussed various aspects of the building's foundation and canned infrastructure. Around noon, Adam heard something that made his heart stop. One of the contractors calling out about an irregularity in the east wall structure. He froze with his mop in hand, straining to hear more details, but the voices were too muffled and distant to make out clearly. 20 minutes later, Winston emerged from the basement looking troubled. He found Adam in the main dining room and approached with an expression that suggested serious concerns. "Adam," Winston said carefully, "the contractors have found some things downstairs that are raising questions. I was wondering if you might have noticed anything unusual during your time working down there." This was it, Adam realized. The moment of truth when his secret investigation would either be revealed or successfully concealed. His response in the next few minutes could determine everything. His job, his legal position regarding the treasure, possibly even his freedom if Winston decided to pursue charges for trespassing or theft. "What kind of things?" Adam asked, hoping he sounded appropriately curious rather than panicked. "Evidence that someone has been doing unauthorized work in the basement," Winston replied, watching Adam's face carefully. "Disturbed areas near the cave sections, tool marks on some of the walls, signs that someone has been accessing areas that should have been sealed off." Adam's mind raced. How much did Winston actually know? Was he fishing for information, or did he have concrete evidence of their activities? "I've noticed some loose stones in a few places," Adam said carefully. "Old buildings like this, sometimes the masonry shifts over time." I assumed it was normal settling. Winston nodded, but his expression remained skeptical. "The contractors think some of the disturbances are recent, within the last few weeks, possibly. They're also picking up some unusual readings on their structural assessment equipment, suggestions of hollow spaces that aren't accounted for in any building plans we have." The mention of hollow spaces sent a chill down Adam's spine. If the contractors had sophisticated enough equipment to detect the hidden chambers, it was only a matter of time before their investigation led to the treasure cache. He had to make a decision. Continue trying to conceal their activities, or take control of the situation before it spiraled beyond his influence. "Mr. Blackwood," Adam said, making the choice that felt most likely to protect both his daughter's future and his partnership with Emily. "I think there are some things you should know." Winston's eyebrows rose. "What kind of things?" "The kind that explain why people have been asking questions about your great-uncle Cornelius in this lodge," Adam replied, "and the kind that might be very important for both of us." For the next hour, Adam carefully explained his initial discovery of the basement chamber, his meeting with Emily, and their subsequent investigation. He was selective in his details, emphasizing their careful documentation and legal research, while downplaying the extent of their treasure recovery. Most importantly, he positioned their work as a service to Winston, helping him discover assets that rightfully belonged to his family. Winston listened with growing amazement, occasionally asking questions, but mostly just absorbing the incredible story Adam was telling. When Adam finished, Winston sat in silence for several minutes, clearly struggling to process the implications. "You're telling me," Winston said finally, "that there's a hidden chamber in my basement containing treasure worth millions of dollars?" "Possibly much more than that," Adam confirmed. "Emily has been researching the historical context, and based on what we've found, your great-uncle was essentially running a private vault service for wealthy clients during the 1920s. The amount of wealth stored down there is extraordinary." Winston's expression shifted from skepticism to excitement to anxiety and back again. "Why didn't you tell me about this immediately? Why conduct a secret investigation instead of involving me from the beginning?" It was a fair question, and Adam had been prepared for it. Because we needed to understand what we were dealing with before involving anyone else. If word had gotten out prematurely, If treasure hunters had descended on this place before we could properly document everything, you could have lost control of your own property. We wanted to make sure you had all the information you needed to protect your interests. Winston seemed to accept this explanation, though Adam could see he was still processing the enormity of what he'd been told. This woman Emily, this partner of yours, what's her role in all this? She's the expert who figured out there was something to find here, Adam replied. Without her research and equipment, we never would have located the hidden chamber. She's also been handling the legal research to make sure everything we do is properly documented and legally sound. And what exactly are you proposing in terms of how we handle this discovery? Winston asked. This was the crucial moment, Adam realized. How he answered this question would determine whether their treasure discovery became a collaborative success or a contentious legal battle. I think we should work together, he said. You as the property owner, Emily as the historical expert, and me as the person who actually found the chamber. We pool our resources, get proper legal and financial advice, and make sure everything is handled correctly. Winston was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he said, I want to see this chamber for myself. And I want to meet this Emily Rhodes and understand exactly what kind of partnership you're proposing. Adam felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Winston wasn't demanding they turn everything over to him immediately, but he also wasn't accepting their claims without verification. I can arrange that, Adam said. Emily is very professional, and she's been documenting everything we've found. I think you'll be impressed with how thoroughly she's approached this. That evening, Adam found himself in the unusual position of leading Winston Blackwood through the basement of his own hotel, showing him secret passages and hidden chambers that had existed under his feet for his entire board's ownership of the property. Winston's amazement at seeing the tunnel and the treasure chamber was everything Adam had hoped for, validating their claims and establishing the credibility of their discovery. Emily arrived an hour later and proved to be everything Adam had promised. She presented Winston with comprehensive documentation of their investigation, detailed photographs of the treasure cache, and preliminary legal research about ownership rights and finder's claims. Most importantly, she outlined a collaborative approach that protected everyone's interests while maximizing the value of their discovery. The key thing to understand, Emily explained as they stood in the treasure chamber surrounded by centuries-old wealth, is that this isn't just about dividing up money. This is about preserving historical artifacts, understanding their provenance, and making sure everything is handled in a way that protects all of us legally. Winston was clearly impressed with Emily's professionalism and expertise. More importantly, he seemed to recognize that their careful approach had actually protected his interests rather than threatening them. If you had been treasure hunters, just looking to grab whatever you could find, he mused, you could have emptied this place weeks ago and I never would have known what I'd lost. That's exactly why we documented everything so carefully, Emily replied. This discovery is too important and too valuable to handle recklessly. By the end of the evening, they had reached a preliminary agreement. Winston would receive 60% of the treasure's value as the property owner, while Adam and Emily would split the remaining 40% as the finders and researchers. All three would work together to ensure proper legal documentation, professional appraisal, and secure handling of the assets. More importantly, from Adam's perspective, Winston agreed to keep him on as a full-time employee with significantly increased responsibilities and compensation. Instead of losing his job, Adam found himself promoted to head of security and property management for what was likely to become a very valuable estate. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of legal consultations, professional appraisals, and media attention, as word of their discovery inevitably became public. The total value of the treasure cache was ultimately assessed at just over $200 million, making it one of the largest private treasure discoveries in American history. Adam's share, even after legal fees and taxes, was more than enough to secure Ella's future and his own. But perhaps more importantly, the discovery had restored his sense of purpose and self-worth. He was no longer just a former boxer struggling to survive, but a man who had contributed to a significant historical discovery. The mockery from his former boxing colleagues had stopped entirely, replaced by a mixture of amazement and grudging respect. Marcus Rodriguez had even called to apologize for his earlier taunts, admitting that Adam had found something more valuable than any championship belt. But the greatest change in Adam's life wasn't financial. His partnership with Emily had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful than either of them had initially expected. She had seen value in him when he couldn't see it in himself, had trusted him with secrets and responsibilities that restored his confidence, and had worked beside him as an equal partner in ways that reminded him what true partnership could look like. 6 months after their first meeting in the basement chamber, Emily moved to the mountain permanently, taking a position as historical consultant for the Shallow Lodge, which was being converted into a museum and research center. She and Adam had begun building something together that was worth more than any treasure, a relationship based on mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Ella had adapted to their changed circumstances with the resilience that had always amazed her father. She was excited about the educational opportunities their new financial security provided, but she was even more excited about having Emily in their lives. For the first time since her mother had left, Ella had a female role model who clearly cared about her and her father's happiness. One evening, as they worked together cataloging the final artifacts from the treasure chamber, Emily looked up from her documentation and smiled at Adam. "You know what I realized today?" "What's that?" Adam asked. "The real treasure was never the gold or the jewels," Emily said. "It was finding someone who saw the same possibilities I did, someone who was willing to take the risks necessary to make those possibilities real. The money is wonderful, but the partnership is what changed everything." Adam set down the antique jewelry box he'd been examining and looked at the woman who had transformed his life in ways he was still discovering. "When I first took this job, I thought I was just trying to survive until something better came along. I never imagined that something better would be finding someone who believed I had more to offer than I thought I did." They had found buried treasure worth $200 million, but they had also found something even rarer. Two people who brought out the best in each other, who shared dreams and risks and successes as true partners. In the end, that partnership proved to be the most valuable discovery of all. Years later, when Adam told the story of his treasure hunt to visitors at the Shallow Lodge Museum, he always emphasized that the real lesson wasn't about hidden wealth or lucky discoveries. It was about recognizing that everyone has untapped potential, that sometimes the most important treasures are the ones we find in ourselves when someone else believes in us enough to help us look. The giant who had once been mocked for taking a night cleaning job had indeed found his fortune in the basement of a creepy hotel. But more than that, he had found his way back to believing in himself, and he had found someone who would stand beside him as they built a future worth more than all the gold in their mountain vault. The Shallow Lodge still stands today, no longer crumbling or cursed, but transformed into a place where visitors can learn about history, partnership, and the treasures that wait to be discovered when people have the courage to look beyond the surface of their circumstances. And if you ask Adam Cross, now the lodge's director and chief historical researcher, he'll tell you that the real secret was never hidden in the basement at all. It was hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment when two people would recognize the value in each other and have the courage to claim it together. The mountain still echoes with stories of wealth and mystery, but now they are stories of hope rather than loss, of discovery rather than abandonment, of two people who found that the greatest treasure of all was finding someone who believed in the riches they carried within themselves all along.